Hello and welcome. I am Gimba Umar. Tonight, Supreme Court acquits Senate President Bukola Saraki of all charges bordering on false declaration of assets. Saraki hails Apex Court's verdict, says he's been vindicated. Former Benue State Governor Suswam gets bail in the sum of 500 million naira after federal government arraigns him on illegal possession of firearms and money laundering charges. President Muhammadu Buhari blames disgruntled politicians for some of the killings across the country, pledges continued support for officers and men of the Nigerian army. An ex-Navy diver dies during efforts to rescue 12 boys and their coach trapped in flooded caves in Thailand.
On Business News tonight, economic analysts forecast further drop in Nigeria's inflation rate in June, just ahead of official data from the National Bureau of Statistics next week.
On sports news, the 2018 FIFA World Cup title will remain in Europe after Belgium sends Brazil packing from the global showpiece and as France also boot out Uruguay.
Hello there, and from Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory Police Command disperses police inspector who allegedly killed a female National Youth Service Corps member.
We begin tonight with the verdict of the Supreme Court clearing the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, of all charges bordering on false declaration of assets. The Apex Court also vacated the Appeal Court's judgment, which held that the Senate President had questions to answer on money laundering. Our correspondent, Amaka Okafo, has the report.
The trial of the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, on charges of false declaration of assets has come to a head as the Supreme Court settled the case in the favor of the Senate President. In a unanimous judgment of the Supreme Court delivered by Justice Santos Nweze, the Supreme Court vacated the charges against the Senate President for want of diligent prosecution. The Supreme Court upheld the ruling of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, which discharged the Senate President on all 18-count charge on grounds that the prosecution failed to prove its case against Saraki beyond reasonable doubt, and also dismissed the judgment of the Appeal Court, which held that the Senate President should enter his defense in counts 4, 5, and 6 of the charges. The Supreme Court said the Court of Appeal made caricature of its own judgment when it found as a fact that the entire evidence adduced by the prosecution was hearsay and manifestly unreliable, and still went ahead to agree that a prima facie case had been established against the Senate President in 3 of the 18-count charge. Justice Nweze held that there was no basis for the Court of Appeal to have asked the Senate President to defend himself on the 3-count charge, having found the entire evidence of the prosecution as a product of hearsay, adding that the action of the Court of Appeal amounts to a forensic somersault and capable of making ill of jurisprudence.
The judgment is a vindication of our case before the trial courts. As you would recall, we had submitted to the trial courts that no case had been made out that warrants our having to enter a defense. And effectively, what the Supreme Court has affirmed is that that position, which was upheld by the lower courts, is correct.
That's the decision of the Apex Court. And being the decision of the Apex Court is binding on everyone. It's binding on me, it's binding on my clients, it's binding on everyone.
The Code of Conduct Tribunal, presided over by Malam Danladi Umar, had earlier discharged and acquitted Saraki from the charges against him on the grounds that the charges were predicated on hearsay evidence and that none of the 4 witnesses called by the federal government linked the Senate President with the allegations. Amaka Okafo, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, Dr. Saraki has reacted to the Supreme Court's judgment, saying it has strengthened his belief in the country, his confidence in the judicial process, and the ability of the judiciary to do the justice to all manners of men and in all circumstances. The Senate President, in a statement, says, quote, "At the end of the torturous journey of 1,018 days, counting from September the 22nd, 2015, when the case began at the tribunal, I am happy that I have been vindicated. The Supreme Court has affirmed that there is no evidence of false declaration of assets." End of quote. Dr. Saraki is insisting that his trial at the CCT was politically motivated, adding that the charges were trumped up in the first instance because of his emergence as Senate President against the wishes of certain forces. The Senate President also alleges that the federal government's anti-corruption fight is being prosecuted with vindictiveness to target perceived political opponents. He says, quote, "It has been 3 wasted years across board in this country, 3 years that would have been devoted to tackling issues affecting Nigerians, including economic recovery, insecurity, youth unemployment, and strengthening national institutions, were wasted on malicious prosecution." End of quote. The Senate President ends his statement by calling on his persecutors to allow him concentrate on the job for which he was elected. Also, the Apex Court, the appeal filed by Senator Ayogueze, challenging the election of Governor Ifeanyi Ugwuanyi of Enugu State, has been dismissed for lack of merit. The Supreme Court also awarded costs against the lawmaker on the grounds that the issue he raised have severally been decided on and there was no need for him to bring them again. Senator Eze, who was the governorship aspirant of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, in the 2015 governorship elections, could not get the Court of Appeal to upturn the emergence of Mr. Ugwuanyi as the party's flag bearer. In the lower court, former governor of Benue State, Gabriel Suswam, has been granted bail in the sum of 500 million naira and one surety in like sum. He was granted bail after the federal government arraigned him on a fresh 3-count charge bordering on illegal possession of firearms and money laundering before the Federal High Court in Abuja. The trial judge, Justice Babatunde Quadri, said that the surety, who must be a resident of the Federal Capital Territory, the FCT, should also swear to an affidavit of means that the surety's residential address must be verified by officials of the court. The surety, the court held, must also submit one passport photograph with the court as part of the bail conditions for the former governor and adjourned the matter to October the 24th and 25th, 2018. Suswam pleaded not guilty to the 3-count charge when they were read to him. But the prosecution counsel, Abubakar Alilu, asked the court for a date to commence trial and an order for the remand of the former governor in prison pending the hearing. Away from the courts now, the House of Representatives Committee on Legislative Compliance is questioning the decision of the National Sugar Development Council to restrict the number of sugar importing companies to just 3. The committee argues that there is no policy that supports the restriction. Instead, there is provision for concession to interested companies to boost the country's sugar production capacity. The lawmakers are asking the council to expand the number of participants while questioning why some companies are not enjoying the concession. In response, the Executive Secretary of the National Sugar Development Council explained that there is need to control the number of sugar importers in the country.
As we all know, here we are, one, there's no policy that we have, except you want to give us, that is saying you should limit them to 3 companies. Sugar or whatever that is correct, has limited it to 3 of them. And they are importing sugar, instead of paying 80%, they are paying 10%. Here we're having excuses. Meanwhile, they have other investment. So please, do your answer on the number 1, that you restricted them to just 3 companies. Without any direct policy that says restricted to 3 companies.
If you are going to be importing at all, it should be raw rather than refined. For the simple reason that at least with raw, you add some value, you employ some people, and the factories are on ground. That is where the quota comes in. They need raw sugar to refine in their factory. They already employ people, they have everything, the factory is running, and they need raw sugar. Without the raw sugar, they can't process. So government now put some control in place. You get the raw sugar if you are able to backward integrate. If you open it to people for refined sugar, what are you going to use as the stick for them?
Elsewhere, President Muhammadu Buhari is blaming those he calls disgruntled politicians for some of the killings across the country. The president, who made the assertion in Monguno, Borno State, however, says that his administration will ensure that anyone found culpable will be brought to book. The president also pledged his continued support for officers and men of the Nigerian army as they continue to protect the country's territorial integrity and unity.
His Excellency,
It's the grand finale of the 2018 Nigerian Army Day celebration in Monguno area of Borno State, which began on the 29th of June.
Nigerian Army Day celebration.
This year's edition is themed The Nigerian Army and National Security, a panacea for Nigeria's economic development, and the special guest of honor is President Muhammadu Buhari. As the president pledges his support to officers and men of the Nigerian Army, he reminds his audience that this year's celebration is in line with his administration's 3 cardinal policies of security, economy, and anti-corruption. The president believes that Nigeria is safe thanks to the security agencies, but there are still challenges to be tackled.
There are pockets of violence in several states, some deliberately instigated by disgruntled politicians who have lost all arguments and are desperate to cause mayhem as a way of seeking relevance. We shall fish them out and punish them according to the provision of law.
When you appointed the NSA, the chief of the air staff, and the chief of defense staff, we concluded that the end of the Boko Haram is now or never.
The Chief of Army Staff and the Chief of Defense Staff used the opportunity to highlight recent developments in the country's security architecture.
This year's celebration is unique as it is intended to celebrate the Nigerian Army's achievements as well as showcase the Army's transformational strides in innovation, research and development, civil-military relations and technological advances. The 2018 edition of the Nigerian Army Day celebration has clearly brought to the fore not only the combat efficiency of the Nigerian Army, but also its ability to facilitate humanitarian and socio-economic activities necessary for reconstruction and rehabilitation of the area affected by the Boko Haram insurgency.
Jumper is out, followed by others.
An airborne display and firepower demonstration depict a typical Special Forces raid operation conducted by a combined team of Special Forces from the Nigerian Army. This celebration is an important annual event in the calendar of the Nigerian Army. It's an occasion meant to showcase the roles, capabilities and achievements of the Army while also creating an opportunity to relate and collaborate with the larger society on the maintenance of law and order as well as the security of lives and property.
In part 2, after the break, Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris promises to leave no stone unturned in bringing perpetrators of recent Plateau killings to justice, vows to end bloodshed. Please stay with us.